One day before my son's wedding, my daughter-in-law said, "The best gift would be if you disappeared from our family." So I did exactly that. After selling their house and canceling their dream wedding, what I left in the empty house shocked them. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. If I fail today, I'll lose my place in my own family and the roof my savings helped buy. Kayla's wedding dress glowed like a lighthouse behind her, all satin and tulle and practiced promises. She stood in my son's kitchen with that tight social smile she saved for people she didn't need anymore. "The best gift," she said, "would be if you weren't here tomorrow." Her voice was sugar that had crusted into glass. Evan didn't look at me. He just nodded like a groomsman to fate. The fridge hummed. Someone had shoved a tray of shrimp cocktail in beside a pitcher of lemonade, and the lemon rinds winked at me as if I were the absurd one. I'd spent the morning arranging flowers, the afternoon tying ribbons around place cards, the evening being told I was negative because I questioned swan-shaped ice. Apparently, reality had a bad attitude. "Where, exactly, do you expect me to go?" I asked. My voice surprised me. Calm, almost polite, the way a storm sometimes starts with nothing but a stillness. "A hotel? Your sister's?" Kayla flicked invisible dust off her manicure. "Anywhere not here." "This is my son's house, too," I reminded her. Evan cleared his throat. "It's more Kayla's house now. She handles the finances. She's made all the improvements. You helped once?" "Once." I stared at the custom cabinets I'd chosen and the granite I had touched, with the certainty of a woman spending her late husband's last quiet gift. Once. As if $87,000 were a hiccup in a long conversation, not the reason these countertops existed. Something inside me shifted, not like braking, more like a gear catching new teeth. "You're right," I said softly. "I should go." I think they expected begging, tears, a scene they could call difficult. I gave them none of it. I went upstairs to the guest room that was never called mine and packed like a woman who finally understood there were no more crumbs to be grateful for. I folded clothes I'd washed in their machines into a suitcase I'd bought for their trip to Cabo. I touched a framed photo of my husband, gone now but sturdy as ever in my memory, and whispered, "I'm not going down without a fight." Outside, in my car, by the curb of a house I had helped make real, I called the person who remembered my good sense when I forgot it, my lawyer. "Marissa," I said, when she picked up on a Saturday evening, "I need the purchase file, all of it." "Did something happen, Nora?" I told her. Not the part about my hands shaking in the kitchen or how lemon rinds can look like a smirk if you stare long enough. Just the facts, the demand to vanish, the demotion of my life savings to help once, the way my own son's silence scraped against my ribs. "I've been worried about this," she said, fingers clacking over keys on her end. "We locked that down after you expressed concern about Kayla's spending. Nora, your contribution wasn't a gift. It was a recorded loan. Your name is on the deed. Co-owner, 35%. The car suddenly felt wider. "Say that again. You own 35% and you're on the mortgage as co-borrower. They never returned the acknowledgement forms I sent to formalize a few things, but the recording stands. It's binding." Through the window I could see Kayla in the kitchen, laughing now, veil balanced on her hair like a white halo with opinions. Evan popped a champagne cork. They toasted, sure the villain had been escorted from their fairy tale. "Hypothetically," I said, "what happens if I want out? As co-owner, you can initiate a sale. They have first right of refusal to buy your share. If they can't or won't, the house goes on the market. Proceeds split by the recorded percentages." My next inhale had a plan in it. "Prepare a notice of intent to sell. Monday morning delivery." "Nora, are you sure this will—" "Marissa," I said, tasting steel I hadn't felt in years. "I have never been more sure." I hung up and waited. The sky slid toward violet, and the house glowed the way houses do when lives inside them believe in tomorrow. I made one more call. Lakeside Grove Country Club, this is the events office. Hi, I said. This is Nora Hale. I need the catering manager regarding tomorrow's reception. Contracts in my name. A shuffle, a transfer, a new voice crisp as starched linen. Ms. Hale, how can we help? I'm canceling. Silence, then a sharp breath. The reception is in less than 24 hours. The food is prepped, staff scheduled. I understand. I'll pay the fees. I read my credit card aloud as if it were a poem about a door closing. When the manager gently suggested I consult the happy couple, I said the happiest words I'd said in months. No need, I'm making an executive decision. 20 minutes later, I slid my suitcase onto the linoleum of the Maple View Inn, the kind of place with a waffle iron in the breakfast room and kindness in the eyes of the woman at the desk. I ordered a BLT from room service and ate it cross-legged on the bed, tasting the clean salt of bacon and the precise cut of a decision. At 11:47 p.m., my phone started a duet of calls and texts, then decided to try an aria. What did you do? Kayla's voice, raw and high, climbed the walls of the room. I honored your request, I said, muting a rerun on the TV. You told me to disappear. I did my part. My credit card did too. You canceled our reception. Her breath came like a sob that hadn't yet chosen a direction. 200 guests. You're still getting married, I said. Marriage requires fewer canapes than people realize. Evan took the phone. Mom, this is insane. I didn't cancel your wedding, I said. I canceled my involvement. That's a very different verb. How much was it? Kayla asked, voice small. $14,000. I let the number sit where a blessing might have gone. Silence, the kind that reveals a ledger. We went in circles the way people do when they've always been able to find an exit marked, Mom will fix it. I mentioned restaurant tabs I'd quietly covered, utility bills I'd paid just for now, car repairs that had stabilized more than brakes. I watched the room service tray sweat a little on the table, as if even the ice water were nervous. Those were gifts, she said. Then consider me no longer a philanthropist. When I hung up, the room felt like new territory. Sleep came in pieces. Morning arrived with light that had nothing to apologize for. At 9 a.m., a knock. Evan stood on the threshold in a shirt that remembered a tux and a face that remembered how sleep used to feel. Can we talk? Shouldn't you be pinning flowers to lapels? Kayla's having a meltdown. Her mother's threatening to fly home. Everything's... He gestured in a way that attempted to gather the world into his hands. Sit, I said. He did. This isn't about sleeping arrangements, I began. It's about respect. It's about pretending I'm a wallet with opinions. He started to argue, then watched the words he wanted to use turn to steam. What do you want from me? From you. I folded my hands to keep them from reaching across and smoothing his hair as I had when he was small. I want you to understand that kindness is not an annuity. I want you to understand that I was not put on this earth to underwrite your life. The room phone rang. Ms. Hale? Events office, said a voice I recognized from last night. The bride's mother is on the other line. She's offering to pay all costs if we reinstate. I looked at my son. Hope flickered in his eyes, a match in a wind I no longer intended to shelter him from. That's thoughtful, I said into the receiver. But the cancellation stands. I hung up, and Evan made a sound that wanted to be a protest and landed as a plea. Mom, please. Let me be clear, I said, my voice steady as the little not disturbed sign on the knob. I'm requesting a buyout of my 35% at current market value. If that's not possible, we sell. 35%? The color left his face. Marissa pulled the deed and the mortgage. Everything's recorded. I watched the numbers move through him, watched them find the part of him that could do math and make meals and make a home if he cared enough to learn how. You told me to disappear, I said gently. Fine. but my equity goes with me." He left with a promise to call, which I filed under things people say when they're out of script. When the phone rang again, the voice was thick with tears. "Nora, it's me." I looked out the window at the parking lot where someone in a baseball cap coaxed a golden retriever out of a sedan. "Kayla," I said, and left my tone unseasoned. "I'm sorry, I was stressed. I didn't mean—" She inhaled and made the mistake of reaching for the old choreography. "We can fix this if you just—" "Fixing looks like paying for your choices," I said. "Not by me. If we pay you back, you owe me $87,000 for the down payment and another $37,000 in emergencies." The numbers tasted like pennies and sky. Even at minimum wage, that's years. After we hung up, I ate breakfast in the lobby, one of those waffles you pour into a griddle that flips like a carnival trick, and read the paper like a civilized person. My phone calculated its missed calls in the corner of my vision. I didn't touch it. By late afternoon, local news ran a teaser about a wedding day disaster at a country club. They didn't say names, but the camera found satin and tears like it always does. I changed the channel. I didn't need to watch a story I'd already paid for. The rest of the day I spent doing something I should have done a long time ago. I made a list, not of their debts or my generosity, but of who I was before I got in the habit of apologizing for breathing. I wrote, "I am a woman who learned how to refinish hardwood floors and balance a checkbook in the same summer. I am allowed to expect gratitude. I am not a villain for ending a subsidy." Late afternoon brought a call I didn't expect. "Ms. Hale," said the receptionist, neutral and crisp. "This is the front desk. There's a guest asking to see you. She says she's family." I hesitated. "Describe her." Gray hair, impeccable posture, a polite smile built for committees. That could only be one person. Kayla's mother. She introduced herself as Linda Pierce and asked if she might sit for a minute. She carried herself like a woman who had navigated enough banquets to understand the weight of centerpieces. "I wanted to thank you," she said when we were seated, "for showing my daughter who she really is." I did not expect that. "You offered to pay." "For the guests," she said. "Not for my daughter's behavior. I've been enabling that for 39 years. I thought marriage might mature her. Turns out it just gave her a larger stage." She sipped the coffee I'd ordered from the lobby carafe, as if even her sips knew which fork to use. "I'm not here to change your mind," she said. "I'm here to say I won't be changing mine either. I won't be paying to buy you out. If Kayla wants a home, she can learn what a mortgage statement looks like." I liked her immediately. There's a certain freedom in being past the age where you want people to mistake you for agreeable. We exchanged numbers. She pressed my hand, and for a moment I remembered how it felt to be on the same team as another mother. Teammates in the league of if you spoil them, you'll break them. As evening came, I called Marissa and we set a time to meet, Tuesday at 2. I imagined the feel of the conference table, the precision of documents, the soft thud of a notary stamp. I would walk in as a woman with a percentage and a spine. Night fell in a new, clean way. Around 10 p.m., a text from Evan. "Please, can we talk tomorrow? Without Kayla, just us." Another from Kayla. "I'll apologize at the meeting. We'll figure out a plan, please." I didn't answer either text. Instead, I made tea in the in-room coffee maker because some rebellions are small and smell like lemon. Before I turned in, I sat at the little desk by the window and balanced my own ledger for once. I listed what I'd lost, illusions, the soft lie that gratitude would appear if I waited long enough, and what I'd gained, a plan, a voice, a hotel room that was mine because I paid for it without anyone making me feel guilty. I was not the mother I had been yesterday morning. I was someone more dangerous, and I mean that in the most loving way possible. When sleep finally took me, it did so without negotiating terms. The next day would bring paperwork and perhaps a welfare check and certainly more shouting into phones from people who had built a life on me changing my mind. But today, I had changed something else. I had changed who I answered to. And that was enough to carry me through the hum of the mini fridge and into the kind of sleep where, if you dream of a house, you dream of one where you own exactly the right amount, and everyone inside knows it. Monday began with the sort of blue sky that makes people forgive a weekend they shouldn't. Sun laid itself across the motel's parking lot in neat rectangles, and somewhere a housekeeping cart jingled like a polite parade. I woke before my alarm, the kind of awake that isn't about rest so much as readiness. My coffee tasted like cardboard and resolve. I showered, dressed, answered nobody's questions, and sat at the little desk with a pen and a plan. First, email to Marissa confirming our Tuesday meeting and authorizing her to move ahead. Notice of intent to sell, demand for repayment, all communications from Evan or Kayla to route through her office. Second, a list of accounts where just for now had turned into forever without my consent. Electric, internet, a streaming service they swore they used for workout videos. My emergency credit card I'd handed over when the muffler sagged. I would be turning off the quiet river that had kept their life green while I stood downstream with a paper cup. At 8:12 a.m., 2 firm knocks at the door. I thought it was housekeeping. It was not. 2 officers stood there in uniforms, ironed to an idea. "Ms. Hale?" the taller one asked, as if I might be borrowing the name for the day. "I am," I said. "Seaview Police," he said, gesturing to his partner. "We received a call requesting a welfare check. Caller reported concerns that you may be in distress and possibly a danger to yourself." I had expected knives. They brought me concern packaged as courtesy. "Come in," I said, opening the door wider to a room that suddenly wanted to be a stage. They scanned corners that held only a suitcase, yesterday's newspaper, and the square of sun everyone gets for free. "Do you mind if we ask you a few questions?" the partner said, a woman with eyes that read rooms the way some people read recipes. "I insist," I said, and smiled because sometimes the only way not to shake is to be gracious. We sat. I handed them my ID. I answered questions about my mood, my sleep, whether I was taking medication that made the floor look like a better idea than the bed. I offered them tea because the tiny coffee maker had a kettle mode, and I wanted to be the kind of adult who has tea ready even when ambushed by concern. "Has anyone threatened you?" the woman asked. "Not with weapons," I said, and then clarified, "with stories." I told them, simply, that I had canceled my financial participation in an event, that some parties were unhappy, that they might be practicing a familiar choreography, paint the person with boundaries as dangerous. The male officer took notes and nodded in a way that told me he had met mothers before. "Do you have a support system?" the woman asked. "A lawyer and a list," I said, tapping the notebook on the desk. "Also, a decent breakfast buffet downstairs if I get there before the teenagers." She almost smiled. "We'll need to note that you appear oriented and not in immediate danger. Please include that I am lucid enough to know when I've been used," I said, gentler than it sounds in transcription. "Do you want us to call anyone for you?" he asked. "No," I said. "But if the caller is who I suspect, you might want to make a note about misuse of emergency services." The woman gave me a card with an incident number on it, black ink on white, a little raft of fact I could hold up if anyone tried to drown me in rumor. "If anyone tells you a different story about this visit," she said, "refer them to us." When they left, the room felt like it had exhaled. I took a photo of the card and emailed it to Marissa with the subject line, "Welfare check. Fine, documented." Then I ate a waffle in the lobby as if I had been practicing for this morning all my life. By 9:30, I was at the bank, the kind of glass and brass lobby that's designed to make you feel both secure and slightly unworthy. The manager recognized me because I bring cookies at Christmas and manners the rest of the year. "Good morning, Ms. Hale," she said. "How can we help?" "I need to remove an authorized user," I said, placing a card on the desk like a resignation letter. "I also need to close a line of credit I opened temporarily last spring and place a monitor on my accounts in case anyone attempts to party with my name." We went through the motions that feel like penance even when you're the priest. She clicked and nodded and slid forms toward me. "Do you want to call the authorized user to let him know?" she asked. "He'll notice when the card stops working," I said, and sipped the bank coffee that always tastes like policies. I closed the utility autopays. I set text alerts that would ping me if withdrawals above $50 occurred. I requested printed statements mailed to a P.O. box I had just rented at the post office, where the clerk had wished me a fresh week. With such earnestness, I almost cried right into the slot for change. At 11:15, my phone lit with Evan's name. I let it go to voicemail. A text came through immediately. "Please answer. It's urgent." Urgent has been their code for, "We just looked at a bill." I listened to the voicemail in a quiet hallway that smelled like carpet and decisions. "Mom," he said, voice thin as a receipt. "The police just called. They said they checked on you and you seemed fine. We're just worried." He paused so I could hear the machinery of his next thought. "Also, the caterer is charging us a rush fee because we tried to reinstate. Can you at least—" I stopped the message before it taught me something about my son I wouldn't be able to unlearn. I replied by text, all communication through Marissa Kane, my attorney. "I'm safe. Do not send police to my door again unless you have genuine concern for my life." A typing bubble appeared, then vanished. I put my phone face down and kept moving. At the cell phone store, a teenager with a badge that said, "Bryce tried to upsell me on something that would make my face recognize itself faster." I told him I wanted off the family plan. "You'll lose your discount," he said, pitying me the way teenagers pity anyone with a wallet older than their shoes. "I have been paying for that family plan," I said. "I'll survive." He tapped and nodded and somehow turned a monthly bill into a funeral and a birth certificate. "Do you want to keep your number?" "I want to keep my self-respect," I said, but I checked the box for yes. Lunch was a salad in a park because nothing says emancipation like a bench and a plastic fork. Families drifted by in little bands, toddlers being negotiated with, grandparents being honored by being allowed to hold a baby for 6 minutes straight. I thought about the day Evan was born, how the nurse had put him in my arms and I had felt the terrifying rush of forever. Love is a contract with a long, fine print section called grief. My phone buzzed, a number I didn't know. I answered because I am learning which unknowns to invite in. "Ms. Hale?" a crisp voice said. "This is Officer Delgado with Seaview Police. We're following up because the caller who requested the welfare check has now alleged financial exploitation. Claims you took funds that were intended for the wedding and canceled services out of malice." The park blurred, a watercolor left in the rain. "Yeah." "The contract was in my name," I said. "My card paid. I have statements." "I figured as much," he said. "We have the incident report from the welfare check. You were calm, oriented, not in distress. This second allegation sounds like a civil matter, not criminal. But we do need to document your side. If you can email receipts and a brief statement, that suffices." "You'll have them in an hour," I said. He gave me his email. I sat on the bench and wrote a statement using the only voice that has ever saved me, plain. I attached images of contracts, screenshots of texts where Kayla had directed me to place orders and float deposits just until the bonus, notations on checks that read down payment and emergency car repair. I sent a copy to Marissa and BCC'd myself because a little paranoia is just caution dressed better. At 2 p.m., Linda Pierce called. Her hello was the sound a good chair makes. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Apparently in excellent health," I said. "I passed a pop quiz this morning." They tried to make you the story. Well, I said, looking at a child in a red jacket insist that a pigeon should follow him because he was very persuasive. I am a woman of a certain age. If I'm not hysterical, I'm cruel. If I have boundaries, I'm cold. If I pay for things, I'm a saint. If I stop, I'm a witch. She made a rueful sound. Kayla is learning the hard way that generosity is not a birthright. So is Evan, I said, and felt the words land in my chest like a small stone, honest and heavy. I'm meeting my lawyer tomorrow, I added. We're moving ahead. Do you need a ride, a witness, a pot of soup? She asked. You are a marvel, I said. I need nothing but the continued existence of paper. Then consider me on your side of the bleachers, she said. Silently, because that's how adults clap when children are trying to learn the steps. After we hung up, I went back to the motel because sometimes you need to see a door you can lock without a debate. At the desk, the clerk slid me a message, a card with a florist's logo and "Call me" scrawled beneath. I dialed. Ms. Hale, a woman said, breathless and brisk. I'm the owner of Petal and Stem. We have a van full of orchids and hydrangeas. The bride's mother paid in full but requested they be donated. I thought you might know a church or nursing home that would take them. For a moment, I pictured all that beauty meant for a room it would never see. The county hospice, I said. They have a family room that deserves to smell like joy once in a while. Done, she said. And Ms. Hale, I'm sorry for the mess. You were nothing but kind to my staff. I hung up and sat on the edge of the bed until the room steadied. When I could move again, I put structure to the day, a folder labeled House, and inside it, subfolders, legal, financial, communications. I saved the police incident card image, the bank confirmations, the phone plan change. I uploaded screenshots of texts where "please" showed up only next to numbers. I printed a copy of everything at the motel's business center and slid it into a manila envelope with the satisfying rasp of paper behaving. At 4:47 p.m., an email from Marissa. Drafted notice of intent to sell attached. Please e-sign. I'll have a process server delivered tomorrow by noon. Also attached. Letter directing all communications to council. I recommend you forward this to their numbers and emails once I file. I read the notice. It was short, almost blunt. Legal steel wrapped in civility. It identified my 35%, the recorded deed and mortgage, the proposed timeline for appraisal, and the first right of refusal. I signed it with a small thrill that felt nothing like vengeance and entirely like oxygen. I forwarded the communication letter to Evan and Kayla with one line, effective immediately, speak to my attorney. Kayla replied within 2 minutes. This is cruel. Family doesn't do this to each other. I typed and erased 3 sentences, then sent the only one that was true and short enough to bear the weight of the day. Family doesn't tell family to disappear and then send police when they do. She wrote back a paragraph shaped like a scream. I forwarded it to Marissa without comment and put my phone on Do Not Disturb, because sometimes self-respect is a feature you toggle. Dinner was a bowl of chili from a diner that didn't pretend to be anything else. The waitress called me Han and topped off my water like it was a dare. I ate slowly, watching a couple at the counter negotiate the check with soft, practiced argument. I got it. No, you paid last time. Let me spoil you. It was the most romantic conversation I'd heard in years because it was coded in partnership, that endangered language. Back in my room, I opened the mini fridge, stared at a half bottle of motel white wine, and closed it again. I made tea and sat at the window, where night had started to unwind itself over the parking lot. A man walked his dog in dignified circles. Somewhere above me, a TV laugh track rose and fell. At 8:03 p.m., the news anchor did a segment about the viral wedding that wasn't, now with interviews. A bridesmaid blamed toxic negativity and mispronounced common sense. A guest tutted about older people who refuse to pass the torch. The camera cut to a shot of my car leaving the curb 2 days ago. A neighbor with a cell phone and no hobby, apparently. They blurred my plate, but not my outline. I turned off the TV. The world could have its story. I had mine, and mine came with binders and signatures and a date on a calendar. Tomorrow at 2, a table, a lawyer, a pen that made official the thing I'd already done in my heart. Around 9, a soft knock. I checked the peephole and saw the night clerk, a man whose kindness had the steady temperature of a cup of cocoa. He held a small envelope. "This just came for you," he said. Inside, a handwritten note on thick paper. "Nora, hospice received the flowers. They cried. I cried. Thank you for turning waste into grace. LP." I sat with that sentence until the room felt larger than its square footage. I put the note in the financial folder because it belonged there. It was a kind of interest earned. Before bed, I made one more list, not of tasks, but of promises. I will not explain myself to anyone who has already decided I'm the villain. I will not accept money as apology. I will not allow my love to be laundered into obligation. I will not mistake peace for silence. Then I did something radical for a woman raised to measure her worth by her usefulness. I turned off my phone and went to sleep without asking permission. If there was fallout still to come, and there would be, it could stand on the porch until morning. I had secured what mattered today. Incident numbers, signatures, cut cords, a quiet room, a binder that proved I was not crazy but careful. I had placed a small fence around my life and painted the gate a cheerful color. Tomorrow I would sit at a table with my name spelled correctly on documents that name my equity and my rights, and I would be there not as a supplicant, but as a party. And when I stepped out of that office into the same ordinary daylight everyone else got, I would be a woman with 35% and 100% of her own permission. Tuesday came dressed like an ordinary day, so I would underestimate it. I didn't. I woke early, ironed the blouse that always made me feel like I'd read the paperwork twice, and ate the motel waffle because it had become my ritual for doing brave things. I packed the manila envelope fat with proof, kissed the room key as if it were a lucky coin, and drove to Marissa's office with the radio off so I could hear my own courage. The building was all glass and rectangles. Geometry you could trust. In the lobby, a wall of ferns tried to make law look like a friendly forest. It almost succeeded. Marissa met me with that steady smile that says, "I have a plan, and if it breaks, I have a second plan." We shook hands like colleagues, not supplicant and savior. "You ready?" she asked. "I've been ready for 20 years, I said. She laughed softly and guided me to a conference room with a table long enough to seat everyone who had ever doubted me. She laid out neat stacks, notice of intent to sell copies on heavy paper, a draft repayment agreement, a simple budget template printed in a font that made numbers look less like predators, and a one-page summary of my position, which I loved like a poem because every sentence ended in a period that did not apologize. "They'll be here at 2, she said. "I expect they'll try for tears or theatrics. We stay with facts. We keep it short." "Short is mercy," I said, taking my seat where the light found my good side. At 1:58, I saw my son in silhouette through the frosting of the door. He hesitated the way he used to on a high dive, toes curled over the edge of the board, the whole pool waiting for the shape of his courage. He came in, tie askew, eyes landing on everything but me. Kayla followed in a sheath dress that looked like it required its own insurance. She carried a purse the size of a carry-on and a stack of papers that tried to look like a plan. Linda Pierce slipped in after them, quiet as a good seam. She gave me a nod that said, "I'm not here to save anyone. I'm here to witness the saving." Marissa stood. "Thank you for coming," she said, voice tempered steel. "This meeting is to discuss Ms. Hale's intent to sell her 35% interest in the property at 24. She read the address, the numbers crisp as marching feet, "and to explore any good faith buyout proposal you may have. We'll keep it to 1 hour." Kayla opened her mouth like a curtain. Marissa held up a hand. "Ground rules. No personal attacks. No revisiting Saturday. We're here to talk numbers, not adjectives." Evan cleared his throat. "We want to make this right," he said, and the boy I raised peered out for a second. "We brought a budget." Kayla slid her stack across the table as if it were a peace offering and not her first time meeting Excel. I looked. There were categories: mortgage, utilities, groceries, gas, savings. The numbers were optimistic the way a first day at the gym is optimistic. I scanned down, waiting for the rest. It didn't come. "Where's the country club?" I asked. "We're pausing for a month," Kayla said. "And the lash extensions, the standing hair and nail appointments, the doggy daycare?" She blinked as if I'd complimented her earrings. Marissa gave me a tiny nod. "Ms. Pierce," she said, using the kind of polite that can slice paper, "for a buyout to be possible, you'll need debt-to-income ratios that will satisfy a lender. That means a credible budget and proof of cuts, and any buyout must also address accounts where Ms. Hale's credit and cash have been used." Evan rubbed the bridge of his nose, a habit he'd borrowed from his father when problems felt like sunlight you couldn't look straight into. "We can cut more," he said. "We'll cancel streaming, do meal prep, sell the jet ski." The last item surprised me. "You have a jet ski?" "Had," he said, shame finding a place to sit. "It's in the garage." "Add it to the list," Marissa said briskly. "Here's the framework. Appraisal sets current value. Subtract mortgage principal and any recorded liens. Remaining equity is split by the recorded percentages. Ms. Hale's 35% must be paid in full at closing if you refinance to remove her from the note. No promissory notes. No, we'll catch up later. She's done being your bank. If you can't refinance within a fixed window, the property is listed for sale. Simple." Kayla smiled the way people do right before they pitch you a subscription box. "What if we pay her back in installments, like a family plan, with interest?" she added, as if interest were a garnish that made the dish respectable. "You already tried installments," I said. "You called them, 'the bonus is coming.' And just until the tax refund. I'm no longer accepting promises printed on air." Evan looked at me then, properly, the way a son looks at a mother when a story ends and another begins. "We didn't want to lose you," he said, voice low. "You almost lost a house instead," I said, and reached into my envelope for the printouts I'd made in the motel business center. "This is my credit report. This is the mortgage history. This is your HELOC draw from May." I slid the papers across, that soft rasp of truth that still gives me chills. "HELOC," Linda repeated, brows climbing. Marissa's jaw tightened the way competent women's jaws do when they learn the scope of what they're about to fix. "There's a recorded home equity line of credit," she said, flipping through her own set of documents. $42,000 limit, $38,000 drawn. She looked at Evan. "When did you open it?" He looked at Kayla. She shifted in her chair, recrossed her legs, and chose a new tone. "We had to renovate," she said, gesturing vaguely. "And the ring." She stopped, the word ring hanging in the air like something gaudy in a store window. "The ring?" Linda asked, and I saw a vein of steel in the older woman that made me like her even more. "No one needs a stone big enough to see from the moon." "It wasn't just the ring," Evan said quickly, but the quickness betrayed him. "There were things." "The monthly payment on the HELOC," Marissa said, tapping the column in the statement, "has not been made for the last 2 cycles." She turned a page. "And the mortgage is 31 days past due. That means a late fee and a credit ding for both borrowers. If you miss again, they can file a notice of default." The room changed temperature. That was the midpoint, right there. The part of the bridge where you look down and realize how far there is to fall. I felt my mouth go dry the way it used to when I'd find an overdue library book under the sofa and know I'd taught my son better than that. "You're 31 days late?" I asked, keeping my voice as even as a ruler. Evan's face crumpled into the man-child I'd overprotected. "We thought we could catch up after the wedding," he said. "The caterer wanted payment and the dress and the photographer and the bonus wasn't real," I finished for him, "because I am done waiting for reality to volunteer." Kayla's eyes flashed. "It's one late payment," she said. "Plenty of people fall behind for a moment." "You fall behind when you trip," Linda said, not bothering to frost it. "You two have been sprinting toward a cliff." Silence arranged itself politely around the table while consequences set their places. Marissa folded her hands, a gesture that looked like prayer but was really strategy. "Here's what this means," she said. "Refinancing just got harder because of the late pay and your DTI. A lender will want stability and proof you can handle the new note without Miss Hale. You have a narrow window to cure the default if it goes that far, and to bring the HELOC current. During that window, Miss Hale's exposure is unacceptable." She slid a thin packet from the bottom of her stack. "This is a standstill proposal. Ms. Hale is willing to pause active steps to list the home for 30 days on these strict conditions." She counted them off on fingers that wore a simple band, the anti-ring to Kayla's idea of commitment. 1. Within 72 hours, you bring the mortgage current and pay the HELOC arrears, proof to our office. 2. You open a separate escrow account titled for the property, not your personal names. Direct deposit your wages there, pay housing-related expenses from there only. 3. You sign a budget with documented cuts. That includes canceling the country club, selling the jet ski, and pausing all non-essential recurring charges. 4. Within 10 days, you meet with a HUD-certified housing counselor and begin a refinance application with a lender we approve. 5. You sign a stipulated partition judgment today that I will hold in escrow. If you default on any term, I file it and we proceed to sell. There will be no further warnings. 6. All communication to Ms. Hale goes through me, and any attempt to harass, malign, or misuse emergency services ends this standstill immediately. She pushed the packet toward them. "This is our mercy. It's also your last one." Kayla's mouth opened, closed. She looked at Evan as if he were a magic trick that had failed at the reveal. "We can't cut everything," she said. Disbelief and indignation arguing over the microphone. "The club is where we network. It's where clients are." Marissa didn't blink. "The bank doesn't accept networking as currency." Linda leaned forward, folded her hands the way women do when they're about to say a thing that should be stitched on a sampler and nailed above the door. "Kayla, love," she said evenly, "if you want a life that looks expensive, you need a life that pays for it. I will not finance pretense." "Nor," she added, turning her gaze on Evan with the mercy of accuracy, "will I watch my daughter use someone else's mother as an ATM with feelings." Evan flinched. I did too, a little, because truth, when spoken kindly, can still sting like lemon on a cut. He rubbed his palms on his pants. "We'll do the cuts," he said. "We'll sell the jet ski. We'll cancel the club." He looked at Kayla as if asking permission to be responsible. She didn't nod. She also didn't say no. "There's more," Marissa said quietly, and she slid one more sheet across the table, a printout from the county recorder. 3 weeks ago, a mechanic's lien was filed for $11,000 from a contractor. It appears there was a kitchen project? Kayla's chin rose. That backsplash was necessary. The old one was... "Fine," Evan said to her, soft but with a spine I hadn't heard from him in a while. It was fine. He looked at me then, and something unclenched in my chest because I saw a man, not a boy. "I'm sorry," he said. "I let this happen. I let her talk me into..." "Stop," I said, and held up a hand. "I'm not your confessor. I'm a co-owner. Apologies don't fix numbers. Action does." He nodded, shame settling into resolve the way flour settles into dough once you stop overworking it. "We'll sign the standstill," he said. Kayla's head snapped toward him. "We will." Evan kept his eyes on me. "We will." Her laugh was a small, sharp thing. "And what do we eat, Evan? Beans and sermons? Do we sell my ring, too?" Linda's voice was gentle, which made it harder to ignore. "You sell what you have to in order to keep your primary shelter. That's adulthood." "I'm not selling my ring," Kayla said, and crossed her arms as if they were barricades and not just jewelry holders. "We're not asking you to," I said. "We're asking you to behave as if the mortgage company might show up with a clipboard." Marissa slid signature tabs across the table like little yellow flags, marking where dignity re-enters the chat. "Read and sign," she said. "Initial each page. By initialing, you agree that default triggers filing and that you waive objection to the partition. We'll hold the judgment for 30 days while you attempt to refinance. At day 31, with no refinance approval and no proof of cuts, we list. If you complete a refinance before then and pay Ms. Hale's share at closing, we file a satisfaction, and the partition judgment is void." She looked at me. "Nora, you'll sign here, acknowledging the standstill and authorizing me to proceed upon default." The next 40 minutes were the slow choreography of consequence. Reading, asking the same question 3 different ways, signing, initialing, wrists making that small swivel that means, "I accept this reality." Kayla balked at the escrow account. "I won't have my paycheck under her eyes," she said, tossing her hair as if it were an argument. "It won't be under my eyes," I said. "It will be under Math's." Evan took the pen. "We'll do the account," he said, and signed on the line for people who finally understood that a signature is not just ink. It is a door you close behind you so you can't run back to the room that was killing you. When it was done, Marissa collected the papers with the care of someone lifting a newborn from a bath. She slid the stipulated judgment into a red folder and wrote across it in neat block letters, "Hold, file only upon default." She looked at all of us one by one. "The clock starts now," she said. "I'll email you the checklist. By Friday at noon, I want proof the mortgage and HELOC are current, and documentation of club cancellation and jet ski listing. By Monday, I want the escrow account established. By next Thursday, I want the counseling appointment confirmation and the refinance application receipt. Miss any of these, and I file. Do not test me." Kayla exhaled a sound like air leaving a party balloon. "This feels punitive," she muttered. Marissa didn't flinch. "It is protective." Evan nodded. "Thank you," he said to Marissa and then to me, raw and unornamented. "Thank you." I didn't say you're welcome. I'm learning that gratitude is not a coupon you redeem for a smile. "We'll see," I said. As we stood, Linda touched my arm, a featherweight of solidarity. "Tea at my place later?" she asked, low enough that only I could hear. "We can practice not rescuing adults." "I'd like that," I said, "because practicing is how you get good, even at boundaries." In the hallway, Kayla paused, and for a heartbeat we were just 2 women who'd chosen different altars. "I will apologize," she said, not quite looking at me. "At some point. Today is not the day." "I'm not collecting apologies," I said. "I'm collecting payments." Her mouth twitched. Anger, maybe, or a first flinch of respect. Then she walked ahead, heels writing a staccato across the tile. Evan lingered. "Do you hate me?" he asked, like a child asking about weather. The truth showed up without dressing itself as something else. "No," I said. "I love you enough to stop helping." He nodded, eyes wet but not pleading. "We'll do this," he said. "We'll fix it." "Then show me," I said, and we let the elevator doors close on all the words we weren't going to say anymore. After they left, Marissa and I sat back down. The table looked suddenly spacious, the way your kitchen looks bigger when you take the stacks of unsorted mail to the recycling. "That was the midpoint," I said, and she raised an eyebrow. "Of what?" "My story," I said. "The moment when the problem turned into the lesson." She smiled. The lesson is to get things in writing sooner. That's the footnote, I said. The headline is that I can want love and want safety at the same time. We reviewed the checklist like air traffic controllers. She warned me there might be a tantrum disguised as a crisis when the club card stopped working or the jet ski found a buyer. She suggested I keep my phone on Do Not Disturb and check messages at set times, the way you check the oven when you're baking bread, with intention, not compulsion. I left with a folder that clicked shut with the sound of a gate that had finally learned to latch, not just lean. Outside, the afternoon had the bright, flat light of a weekday that had done its job. I drove to a simple cafe where nobody knew me and ordered soup and a roll, carbs for courage. Linda found me 20 minutes later, slid into the booth with the grace of a woman who had decided long ago how she would inhabit her age. She ordered tea, and when it arrived, wrapped her hands around the cup like a pilgrim who'd reached a small shrine. "You were magnificent," she said. "So were you," I said. "Your line about not financing pretense should be carved into a lintel." She smiled, then sobered. "I did not know about the HELOC," she said. "I failed my daughter if she thought that was an acceptable secret." "We all fail," I said. "Sometimes by loving too much and sometimes by loving the wrong thing." We talked about ordinary matters because ordinary is a luxury when you've been living in a storm. The hospice flowers. They'd sent her a photo of the family room transformed, oxygen pumps chugging beside a riot of hydrangeas, like joy refusing to be sensible. The weather, breezy, because September knows when to be kind. The small ways we would occupy the next 30 days without hovering. "No daily checking," Linda said. "No how's the budget?" Texts. "We let the consequences do the teaching." "We knit," I said. "We garden. We read books where no one asks a middle-aged woman to be grateful for crumbs." When I returned to the motel, the clerk slid an envelope across the desk with a conspiratorial smile. "For you." Inside, a cashier's check made out to Seaview Mortgage Servicing in the exact amount of the arrears plus late fee, with a sticky note in Evan's handwriting. "Today." I sat on the edge of the lobby sofa and let that one word wash through me. Not enough. Not everything. But today. I took a photo and sent it to Marissa. "Received," she replied. "Now the HELOC." The jet ski listing went up an hour later. Evan texted a screenshot with the price set at something just shy of painful. 10 minutes after that, an email from the club confirming cancellation, a terse line about membership, suspended pending arrears resolution, that read like a society page printed in shame. I forwarded everything to Marissa and closed my phone. In the quiet, the day rose around me in layers. If you'd asked me last week what victory would look like, I would have said a check for $87,000 and an apology delivered with cake. Today, victory looked like a red folder marked "Hold" and a son who had decided, finally, to be a man when someone asked him to. It looked like a woman my age refusing to trade self-respect for access to a kitchen she paid for. It looked like a standstill agreement that might usher us to a refinance or to a sale, but would usher me either way to a life with fewer sirens in it. Before bed, I stood at the motel window and watched a couple cross the parking lot carrying a pizza between them like treasure. The man held the door for the woman with the juggling grace of someone who has learned to carry his share. That, I thought, is the only kind of romance I'm still interested in witnessing, the kind with hands full and heart steady. I made tea. I set my alarm. I slid the red folder under my suitcase like a talisman. And I slept the sleep of a woman who had put a clock on chaos and given it an adult chaperone. In the morning, there would be proof to collect and the next square on the checklist to shade in, and maybe a hiccup dressed as a hurricane. But tonight, the midpoint had passed. I had crossed the bridge and found, to my surprise, that the person I most wanted to meet on the other side was me. The next 10 days were the sort of slow thunder that never quite breaks and still rearranges the furniture. I kept my phone on Do Not Disturb, checked messages at breakfast and after dinner, and spent the hours between becoming a person again in small, stubborn ways. I walked 2 miles each morning, past the maple trees that had decided to audition for autumn. I learned the names of the motel staff and brought them a box of grocery store cookies with a bow I tied myself. I read a paperback whose greatest conflict involved a missing teacup. I did not refresh the bank apps that weren't mine to manage anymore. When anxiety tried to crawl up my spine, I ironed things that didn't need ironing and told myself I was smoothing out time. Friday came with the nervous energy of a kid dressed for picture day. At 9:47 a.m., an email to Marissa, proof the mortgage was current. At 10:32, nothing yet on the HELOC. At 11:19, a screenshot of the club's cancellation confirmation. At 11:41, a photo of the jet ski on a trailer behind a pickup. The caption read, "Sold" in Evan's handwriting, bold and shaky. At 11:53, a message that made my stomach tighten like a fist. HELOC funds in motion. Bank is slow. We're at the branch. Please don't file. Marissa replied with the precision of a metronome. Noon deadline stands. I need a receipt. It arrived at 11:58, time stamped, blessed by a teller's initials, the exact arrears plus fee. I exhaled a breath I had apparently been renting from God. Marissa's reply arrived 2 minutes later. Received. Stand still remains in force. Next deliverables: escrow account by Monday, housing counselor by Thursday, refinance app confirmation by next Friday. That afternoon, I took tea at Linda's. She lived in a townhouse that wore its good bones without makeup. Her kitchen smelled like lemon and history. We sat at her small table and looked like women plotting a heist, which is to say we were planning not to steal anything, least of all our children's consequences. They brought the HELOC current with the jet ski and the last of the gift money, she said, stirring sugar into her cup like it meant something. Kayla cried in the parking lot, but she signed the cashier's check. She cried because she paid or because she couldn't buy? I asked. Yes, Linda said, and we sipped the kind of laugh that women of our age have learned to value. Quiet, earned, unphotogenic. Saturday morning, the standstill put on real shoes. Evan texted at my designated hour, grocery run done, using calculator. It's humbling. He attached a photo of a cart filled with store brands, chicken thighs, not breasts, bags of dried beans that look like patience. Behind the cart, you could see Kayla, sunglasses on, hair pulled back, standing very straight the way people do when they feel shorter than they want to be. A woman I recognized from the country club, pearls that never met a day off, hovered near the bakery. We ran into Mrs. Whitcomb, Evan wrote. She said, "Oh, trying something new?" And Kayla said, "Trying adulthood." It came out sharper than she meant. Good, I typed, and did not send. Instead, I forwarded the photo to Marissa with no comment because facts were doing a better job than my feelings. On Monday, the escrow account confirmation arrived. They had titled it in the property's address just as Marissa required. Direct deposit set. Auto pays for the mortgage and HELOC set from that account only. They sent a photo of scissors clipping the old store credit card that had been responsible for the backsplash with the personality. We cut it, Evan wrote. Kayla cried on this one too, but less. Wednesday brought the HUD counselor appointment. The counselor, a woman named Gabriella with a floral scarf and the patience of a lighthouse, required a budget that included an emergency fund and a debt snowball that looked less like a snowball and more like a handful of pebbles rolled into something tenacious. She explained debt-to-income ratios in words that stuck. If 35% of your gross goes to housing, she said, tapping her printout, you are balancing on your toes. If 45% goes to housing and debt, you are balancing on your eyelashes. Evan absorbed it like a man discovering gravity at 40. Kayla blinked and asked about the self-care line item. It exists, the counselor said, but it comes after do we keep the roof? Self-care that costs the roof is called self-harm. Evan texted me a photo of the whiteboard with 2 circles, need and want, and a list under each that would have made the Kayla of 2 weeks ago roll her eyes hard enough to sprain something. Under need, mortgage, utilities, groceries, gas, car insurance, minimum debt payments, pet food. Under want, club streaming, ring upgrade, designer nails, a scribble where someone had started to write frivolous, then wisely stopped. Thursday afternoon delivered the pinch I had been expecting without knowing its shape. Evan called during the window I allowed. His voice had that new steadiness mixed with old fear. "We met with a credit union," he said. "They pulled our credit. We don't qualify yet. The late mortgage payment dinged us. They want 3 months of on-time payments before they'll consider the refinance, and they want our DTI under 43. We're at 49, and that's if we pretend groceries are free." There it was, the reality problem hiding inside our neat 30-day standstill. Lenders like patterns, not promises. Patterns take time. Time was the one commodity our agreement measured with sharp teeth. "What did they suggest?" I asked. "Pay down the HELOC more to improve DTI or increase income," he said. "Or both. They said I could pick up overtime and Kayla could—" He stopped, as if the next word was fragile, and he didn't want to drop it. "Work," I supplied, because someone had to chase the word onto the table and sit it upright. "She booked 2 brides for October," he said quickly. "Makeup and hair, that helps. And she asked her friend at the salon about hours. There's a front desk position open 2 evenings a week. She's thinking about it." I swallowed the sentence that tried to sprint through my mouth, finally, and replaced it with the sentence that keeps relationships from becoming galleries of resentments. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "Send Marissa the credit union's email. Let her see if any lender will start an application now that you've begun. If not, she and I will talk about terms." That night, I lay in the motel room with the TV murmuring something about a cooking competition where people cried over soufflés and thought about the geometry of mercy. Mercy isn't a door you leave propped open so raccoons can move into your kitchen. Mercy is a door you open during visiting hours, for people who've learned where the doorbell is. "Friday morning," Marissa called. "We have a conflict of calendars," she said, and I could hear the edge of amusement she allowed only with me. "Credit union wants 3 on-time payments and a DTI under 43. Our standstill is 30 days. Math says those lines do not intersect." "What's our play?" I asked. "I'll propose an extension to 90 days with stricter conditions and a bond," she said. "They post $5,000 into escrow as skin in the game, non-refundable if they default. The money would go to your legal costs if they miss a deliverable. We add automatic bank verification to the escrow account, so we get read-only access to confirm deposits and housing payments. We require proof of income increase, Kayla's salon hours on paper, Evan's overtime schedule, and we add a condition that no new debt is incurred without my written consent. If they agree, we extend. If they balk, we list." My heart did that strange thing it does now, tender and steel-tipped. "Send it," I said. She did. They signed. The $5,000 hit escrow by end of day. Proof of dollars doing something they rarely did in that house. Behave. That evening, Linda and I walked the neighborhood and talked about nothing serious until the sky handed us an orange that could not be ignored. "She started at the salon," Linda said softly without gloating. "Front desk. Her first shift is Tuesday. She posted a selfie in the break room and didn't tag it with a brand." "Progress," I said. "The untagged kind is my favorite." Saturday, the consequences arrived wearing sneakers, not drama. Evan texted a photo of a handwritten meal plan on the refrigerator. Monday, chili. Tuesday, pasta bake. Wednesday, leftover chili turned into tacos, because that's how America recycles. There were check marks next to bring lunch, brew coffee at home, sell standing mirror, post vintage handbag online. Under that, Kayla, Salon 2's Thurs, 5 and 9 p.m. She had written her own schedule down where dinner used to be, and the symbolism was almost too on the nose. I spent part of the afternoon at the hospice, dropping off more flowers the florist had begged to give away from another event that didn't need that many centerpieces. A man in a cardigan thanked me as if I had invented colors. I stood for a long moment in the family room and breathed air that probably smelled like somebody's last wonder, and I was grateful all over again for the economy of redirected beauty. Sunday morning, a neighbor sent me a clip from the neighborhood app, that notorious parade of porch pirates and lawn judgments. Anyone know why the Hale Pierce wedding got canceled? Saw the mom at the Mapleview Inn. The comments performed their usual ballet of certainty and error. I closed the app and deleted the text. Let the world have its chorus. My job now was to keep singing my melody in the key of paper. Monday, the appraiser came. Evan texted that the man measured everything that didn't move and frowned at the backsplash like a disappointed uncle. He said comps are all over the place, Evan wrote. I Googled comps. Now I'm dizzy. If it appraises low, we'll have to bring more to closing to buy you out. If it appraises high, our payment goes up if we refinance. Is it too late to go back to being children? Yes, I didn't type. That afternoon, Kayla called in my check-in window. Her voice was different, less glitter, more gravel. We're selling the mirror, she said, and the handbag, not the ring. I am not hungry for your ring, I said. I am hungry for your receipts. Silence, then a laugh that sounded like a cork gently eased out of a bottle. I gave the salon my bank info, she said. Direct deposit. It felt like marriage vows, but to math. Good, I said. Consider wearing something simple on your first day to celebrate. You mean not a cape? She said, and we both smiled. Women who had learned that capes make you think you can fly when you have, in fact, only a staircase to climb. Tuesday brought a hiccup disguised as a hurricane. The contractor with the mechanic's lien left a voicemail threatening to pursue foreclosure remedies, if not paid within 7 days. The legal words were a costume for something simpler. He wanted his money. Marissa handled it like a woman swatting a mosquito without disturbing the picnic. She called him, acknowledged the lien, and negotiated a settlement of $9,000 if paid within 10 days. Savings that came from him not wanting to pay an attorney to collect $11. Evan and Kayla would have to find the $9. That evening, Evan texted, We can do 5 from selling the mirror and handbag and the last of the wedding gifts. I can pull 4 from overtime pay by next Friday if my boss approves. That's 9. We can do it. You owe me nothing today. I didn't type. You owe the contractor. Instead, I sent, Send approval from boss to Marissa. She'll add it to the file. Wednesday, Kayla worked her first shift. Linda sent me a photo taken from her car, blurry and tender, her daughter behind a counter, hair in a ponytail, a stack of appointment cards in hand, no ring caught in the salon light because the ring stayed home when it learned it couldn't pay for anything. Kayla looked, there's no other word, useful. Sometimes beauty is less a look than a posture. Thursday morning, the refinance application went in. Not approved, no one expected that yet, but logged in a system that respects timestamps like rites of passage. The counselor sent a note. First month of on-time payments will be considered October if mortgage shows paid before the 15th. Keep up momentum. The appraiser sent his report, which was a love letter to comps written by a man who hates adjectives. The number landed in the range that made keeping the house possible if sacrifices stopped being a novelty. It wasn't high enough to make anyone feel rich or low enough to make anyone panic. Just sober, the way numbers are when they've stopped being characters in your drama and started being facts. That afternoon, Kayla called during my window. Her voice had that edge of brittle. It's humiliating, she said. Cutting cards, telling Mrs. Whitcomb I couldn't meet at the club, working while Evan eats dinner without me. People will talk. They will, I said. They'll say you traded a look for a life. What does that mean? She asked. defensive as a cat pretending not to fall off a windowsill. It means you are building something no one can repossess, I said. A habit, a spine, a history of doing the thing after the talking. It means when anyone asks you about your ring, you can point to your house. Not selling the ring, she said automatically, but her tone had softened into something that knew itself less. I know, I said. Keep the ring. Sell the stories you used to tell yourself. Friday evening, the contractor's settlement hit. $9,000 done. He filed a release of lien the following Monday, and the county clerk stamped it with the same thunk they use to bless marriages and divorces and the dog licenses that keep animals safe. Paper, it turns out, works harder than most people. By then, the salon had called to offer Kayla an extra 4 hours on Saturdays because she'd smiled at a woman whose daughter was getting married and not once mentioned a brand. Evan sent a photo of his time card, overtime approved, and a selfie in the break room with his thumb up and tired in his eyes. He was learning that tired you earn beats, tired you perform. Midweek, the pinch tightened again. Mrs. Whitcomb posted on the neighborhood app about declining standards because someone's grass had grown to a scandalous 3 inches. The comments veered, as they do, into morality, and someone mentioned certain families and weddings that never happened. Linda, of all people, registered and wrote one sentence that slid through that thread like a spindle straightening warped wood. Standards rise when people pay their bills. She didn't name anyone. She didn't have to. The thread died like a fire starved of oxygen. 2 weeks into the 90-day extension, Marissa scheduled a check-in meeting. We sat at her table again, the red folder still a talisman. She slid a progress sheet toward me. Mortgage and HELOC current. Escrow account healthy. No new debt. Budget cuts documented with receipts and canceled memberships. Contractor lien released. HUD counselor satisfied. Refinance application in queue with the credit union and a second lender. They're doing it, she said. Not a smile exactly. More like an acknowledgement that the ship had turned 5 degrees, which at sea is everything. What about me? I asked, surprising myself. You, she said, have not replied to a single text outside your windows, have not sent $1, have not attended a single fight. You are a star student of boundaries. I thought of the hospice flowers and the motel clerk who bumped me up to a room with a microwave because you make tea a lot, and the way walking had brought back the knees I used to rely on. I am beginning to like the woman I am when I am not paying for anything, I said. We added one more condition to the agreement at Marissa's suggestion, and I agreed without needing to think. A credit freeze on all our files, mine, Evan's, Kayla's, until the refinance or sale. It will inconvenience you, she warned. Inconvenience is the hobby I'm taking up instead of rescuing, I said. She smiled and clicked the mouse. Freeze applied. That night, I dreamt of a house where every room had light that knew its job. In the morning, a text from Evan, precise and small. Paid mortgage again, 2 in a row. Counselor says we're on track if we keep inches steady. I attached the screenshot to my mental refrigerator where I now hung good news like a woman who understands that hope is a practice, not a mood. The last Saturday of the month, they hosted dinner, just the 4 of us. I went because refusing to be a wallet didn't mean refusing to be a mother. The table wore placemats instead of a runner, and the candles were the kind you buy in a pack of 6 for less than $10. The food was chili, again, and cornbread that tasted like someone had read the recipe twice. Evan had cleaned the oven. I could tell by the smell of effort. Kayla's nails were shorter and practical. She did not apologize for them, which made me like them more. We ate, talked about things that weren't budgets, admired the dog's trick of pretending not to be interested in food while angling closer to the cornbread. Linda brought a pie, and we cut it into honest slices. After, Evan handed me an envelope. Don't worry, he said, seeing my expression. It's not money or a bill. Inside, a printout of the refinance application with a bright yellow highlighter over the words, conditional approval. subject to 3 consecutive on-time mortgage payments, DTI amount 43%, verification of income increase, appraisal supporting value. At the bottom, a date. If they met the conditions by December 15th, the loan could close before year end. The math would be tight, but the door existed. "It's not done," Evan said. "But it's not no. Not no," I repeated, and felt something in my chest sit down and stop fidgeting. Kayla walked me to the door. The porch light hummed. A moth flung itself at the bulb like a cautionary tale. "I owe you an apology," she said, words so careful they might have been typed. Not for canceling the party, for all the ways I pretended help was my right. I told myself a story where generosity was a renewable resource. It turns out it's human. It gets tired. I held her gaze. "Thank you," I said. "I accept this apology. I will not accept interest." She almost smiled. "I'm keeping the ring," she said softer now. "But I got an estimate from a jeweler to reset it into something smaller if we need to. I'm not ready, but I'm ready to be ready." "That's a lot of growing in a small sentence," I said. "Keep going." As I stepped off the porch, she touched my arm. "I'm working Tuesday," she said. Would you ever let me do your hair? At the salon? A proper wash and blowout. No brands, just care. On me." "Not on you," I said. "On your schedule. I'll pay the salon, and I'd like that." On the drive back to the motel, the radio played a song I used to dance to in a kitchen owned by a man I loved, in a life where money was a river and not a dam. I let myself feel sad for a minute, and then proud for 5. Grief, it turns out, obeys the same schedule as my phone now. Designated hours, not a right to burst in whenever it wants. In bed, I read a few chapters about the missing teacup and decided I hoped the teacup stayed missing. Some things don't want to be found, they want to be replaced with something that doesn't break so easily. I turned off the light and slept with my back to the door, not because I expected monsters, but because I trusted the lock. In the morning, I woke to a text from Marissa with a single line. December 15th is our new North Star. Below it, bullet points, not because she is unromantic, but because she understands that romance without lists is just cinematography. Oct 15, Nov 15, Dec 15, mortgage paid, DTI check monthly, income verification monthly, no new debt, credit freeze remains, appraisal accepted, conditional approval remains open. The stakes hadn't evaporated. The house could still go on the market if December delivered the wrong kind of surprise, or if old habits returned wearing new excuses. The risk of a forced sale stalked the edges of every ordinary day. But for the first time since Satin had flounced in my kitchen, ordinary felt like a place I might choose to live again. I made the motel waffle, because by now it had become my small sacrament, and I wrote in my notebook 2 final sentences for the month. I will be merciful without being a mattress. I will measure love in effort, not expense. Then I put on lipstick the color of a fresh apple and walked into a day that asked nothing from me except exactly what I had. December crept in disguised as errands and receipts, and I let it because pretending ordinary saved more energy than bracing. The days clicked by on a checklist. Oct 15 paid, Nov 15 paid, 3 counseling sessions attended, overtime approved, salon shifts logged and direct deposited. The escrow account showed a pattern you could tap your foot to. If this were a movie, someone would have added music that made you think we'd learned our lesson and the credits could roll. Life, not bound by editing, waited until the week before December 15th to throw a tire iron. It wasn't dramatic at first. The credit union sent an email with the subject line, "Conditions to close." Marissa forwarded it with a simple, "Call it 2?" So I did. She read down the list as if she were narrating the weather. 3 on-time mortgage payments, check. DTI under 43. If we pay down another $6,500 on the HELOC, they'll accept. 2 months of reserves. Pity times 2, sitting in the escrow account before close. That's $5,200. Verification of income increase, Evan's overtime, Kayla's salon hours, both verified. Appraisal supports value, accepted. I circled one phrase in my mind with a thick black marker. Reserves. Yes, she said, it's the new fashion with underwriters who have been burned. They want to see you can ride out a couple months without setting the house on fire. Sensible, but it's cash. Add the HELOC paydown, and we're asking them to produce nearly $11,700 in the next 7 days on top of December's mortgage. Possible if their sale proceeds and extra shifts hold. Tight if anything hiccups. Things hiccuped. They always do when anyone writes tight. At 4:11 that afternoon, Evan called during the window. We're okay, he began, which is a sentence that never means anyone is okay. Kayla's car made that sound again, and the mechanic says a timing chain. It's either 1200 now or catastrophic later. You can't commute to 2 jobs on catastrophe, I said, and looked at the word reserves in my notes until it threatened to blur. Do you have a cheaper option? Public transit would add an hour each way. You'll fall asleep in your soup. Borrow a car? Share yours? I'm covering the early shift and she has evenings, he said, doing math I could hear. We can shuttle, but not every day. It complicates overtime. Complication is not a category lenders recognize, I said, more dry than cruel. Send the estimate to Marissa. She'll have it in the file. Then both of you sit down with the budget and decide what moves. If the car eats part of the HELOC paydown, you'll have to make it up somewhere. He took a breath that sounded like he was about to ask me something I couldn't give. He didn't ask. It landed between us anyway. The old habit dressed as a question. Can you help just this once? I know, he said finally, and I could hear him step away from it, like a man backing away from a cliff he knows too well. We'll find it. They tried. The mirror and handbag had already become cash. The jet ski was long gone. Overtime would get them part way. Kayla picked up an extra salon shift when someone called in sick. Evan sold tools he'd bought for a home project that could wait. Linda quietly offered to loan them $1,000 at 6% interest and a payment plan, and I watched, proud and relieved, as they said no, because the spirit of our little economy mattered more than plugging a hole. Kayla posted a gently used wedding decor bundle online and answered messages with a patience I wouldn't have credited her with in September. By Friday, the ledger glared. December's mortgage? Paid? The HELOC? Only $3,100 available to apply toward the $6,500 underwriter wanted. Reserves? At $2,700 and stuck. The mechanic wanted his timing chain money before he'd release the car. We met at Marissa's office at 3 p.m., 4 faces that knew paperwork had become weather. Marissa laid out the math with the humanity that makes people hire her twice. Here are the choices, she said. 1. You miss the reserves or the HELOC paydown and the refinance stalls. We then file the partition, list the house in January, and sell in the spring. Ms. Hale receives her 35% at closing from sale proceeds. You two rent for a year and reset. 2. You find the $6,500 us and the $5,200 reserves by Friday. Refinance closes December 15th. Ms. Hale is paid out at closing, note is retitled, you keep the house with a loan you can afford, and a budget that leaves no room for club sandwiches. Kayla stared at the conference table, like it had told a rude joke. There isn't another thing to sell, she said, then corrected herself, because growth is honest. Not that we can live without. Linda cleared her throat. There is one thing, she said, and looked at her daughter the way mothers do when they're about to bring up the story you hoped they forgot. You mentioned resetting your ring. Kayla's hand went, almost automatically, to the stone. The room could have timed a heartbeat to the hesitation that followed. I said I was ready to be ready, she whispered. I didn't say I was ready. Marissa stayed still, the way you do when you don't want a skittish animal to bolt. Kayla, she said evenly, This house needs $11,700 this week. The ring is sentimental, yes. It is also an asset. You can reset later, you can reimagine it later, you can buy it a smaller life and a bigger meaning. Right now, the question is simple. Do you want a ring or a roof? That's cruel, Kayla said, but without heat, like someone reporting the weather. It's adult, Marissa replied. Evan looked at me. I shook my head because I am not a wallet even when I love. He looked at his mother-in-law. Linda shook her head. The same stewardship, different childhoods behind it. He turned back to Kayla and touched her wrist, not the stone. We're choosing our family, he said, and his voice wasn't pleading. We're choosing right now. She took a long breath, one of those gathered ones you take when you decide not to cry yet. How fast? She asked Marissa. If I sell it the normal way, it'll take weeks and they'll lowball. Jewelers will buy today, Marissa said. A pawn shop will buy in an hour. You'll hate both numbers, or you can consign and wait, which you don't have time for. Another option, reset. A jeweler can buy the stone and remount a smaller one for you. They're often kinder when there's future business in it. Let me call a client who owns a reputable shop. He owes me a favor for a prenuptial I made painless. Kayla nodded, eyes glossy and furious at the same time, which is a look women learn when life makes them trade a story for a truth. Call, she said. Marissa called. The jeweler's assistant, a woman with a voice like velvet decisions, told us they could see Kayla at 5, appraise at 5:15, wire funds by end of day if she accepted. They could also discuss a reset. I'll go with her, Linda said, already standing. Evan sat back hard in his chair, relief like a bruise. If we do this, he said, we'll have enough. The HELOC, the reserves, the mechanic, barely. It might leave $23. That's still a number, Marissa said, a tiny smile slipping free. And 23 is bigger than 0. Kayla stood, her hands steady even if her breathing wasn't. Let's do it, she said to no one and everyone. Let's pick the roof. They left. Evan and I stayed with Marissa to assemble the rest of the closing packet because that's what you do when a loved one is selling a symbol. You collate. The escrow officer emailed final figures. The underwriter asked for one more pay stub because documents breed in the dark. We printed, signed, scanned, stacked. Paper performing the incredible trick of becoming a future you can step into. At 6:09, my phone lit. A photo of a velvet tray, the ring lying on it like a sleeping animal. A second photo of Kayla's hand without it. A third of a wire transfer confirmation, $9,800 to escrow. Memo, stone purchase. Another for $750 to Kayla personally as credit toward a future reset. Linda texted a file image of the appraiser's receipt with the clarity of a woman who has been sending proof her whole life because men at desks prefer it to feelings. Mechanic paid, Evan wrote a few minutes later, attaching a receipt as if our family now required evidence as a love language. I felt the relief physically, like a strap loosening around my chest. I also felt grief, sudden and uncomplicated, because there is no version of motherhood where you delight in watching a girl hand over the story she thought would carry her. I let both exist at the same table, because that's the only way any of this works. By Monday morning, reserves sat in the escrow account, tidy as soldiers. The HELOC paydown cleared. The underwriter signed the last condition with the bored finality of a deity who has seen all of this before. Clear to close, Marissa read from her screen and smiled flat out for the first time since we met. Wednesday the 15th, 10 a.m., Seaview title. Bring identification. Check to Ms. Hale will be cut at disbursement. I called the Mapleview Inn front desk and extended my room through the end of the week out of sheer superstition. Then I ironed my blouse again because ritual is how we tell ourselves we belong in rooms we've earned. Seaview Title smelled like coffee and printer toner. The waiting area had the kind of chairs offices buy when they want you to sit upright and sign things. A fake ficus in the corner tried to pretend it was alive. We gathered in a glassed conference room and took our places. Evan in a shirt that had been ironed by effort. Kayla in a simple sweater, hair pulled back, a slim gold band on her finger where the moonstone used to sit. She had reset a small, dignified circle that said, "I am married to reality now." Linda, precise as always, with a folder like mine. Marissa, a general in black with a pen she obviously loves. The escrow officer slid stacks toward us with the calm of a woman who knows most climaxes are just paperwork with better lighting. "First," she said, "the new note and deed of trust, removing Ms. Hale from obligation and placing responsibility solely with Mr. Hale and Ms. Pierce. Fixed rate, 30-year amortization, payment as outlined in the closing disclosure." Evan read and signed with his new carefulness. Kayla did too, her name neat where it used to be ornamental. "Next," the officer said, pivoting to me, "the payoff statement for Ms. Hale's interest. Based on the appraisal and recorded percentages, your 35% of net equity after closing costs equals—" She turned the signature page around and tapped the number with a nicely manicured fingernail. $126,482.13. This will be disbursed by cashier's check today. I had expected relief. What I felt was something closer to return, a portion of myself coming back across a table where it had been held, then spent, then confused with love. I nodded because nodding was what my body knew to do when it did not trust itself to speak in front of glass. We signed our way through tax affidavits, the HELOC closure, the release of lien filing the contractor had faithfully delivered. At one point, Kayla paused and looked at me. "Thank you," she said, no decoration on it, "for stopping us, for not rescuing us." "You did the stopping," I said, "because accuracy is a mercy too." The officer left to print the checks. We sat in a little quiet that had earned its right to exist. Evan reached into his jacket and slid an envelope across to me. "Not money," he said quickly. "I know better." Inside was a letter on plain paper, not typed. I read it while I waited for the sound of a printer spitting a future. He wrote about the moment in September when he'd stood on a porch and told me we were worried after the welfare check and how worried was an old costume for "we want you to undo the thing you did." He wrote about chili and time cards and a credit union officer who did not care how good Kayla looked in a dress, but cared very much how numbers stood in a row. He wrote one sentence that I will carry in the pocket of any jacket I own. I thought love was covering. I understand now it is also uncovering, showing what needs fixing and letting the person with the wrench be the one who learns. I folded it, slid it back, and patted the envelope because that is how some women keep from crying. The officer returned with a stack of checks like the last scene in a play about money that decides to behave. She handed me the cashier's check made out to me, crisp and heavy in that useless way checks are heavy. Marissa watched my face the way a friend does when a thing lands. "You free," she said. "Grammar choosing poetry over rules for once?" Evan took Kayla's hand. Linda kept both of hers on the table, palms down, as if telling fate to sit. I slipped the check into my folder and, without thinking too hard about the symbolism, took out the red folder Marissa had labeled "Hold, File Only Upon Default." I slid it across to the escrow officer. "This can be destroyed," I said. "The partition judgment was our fence. We've walked out the gate." The officer nodded and handed it back to Marissa with a copy of the stamped dismissal she'd already prepared, because Marissa doesn't wait for metaphor to catch up with paperwork. "Filed as satisfied," she said. "The judgment is void. Your credit freezes stay unless you want them lifted. My recommendation is leave them for now." "I like the sound of inconvenience," I said. "It keeps out salesmen." We stood in the hallway afterward, just unsure enough of what to do with our hands that we looked like a family again. Kayla turned her ring, the new modest band, once around her finger and lifted her chin. "We're having spaghetti tonight," she said, "with a salad that tastes like a budget. You're welcome if you want to come, Nora." I thought of the motel waffle iron and my quiet room and the way I slept when the only bills on my nightstand belonged to me. "Another night," I said. "Today I'm going to buy a plant that won't die if I look at it wrong." She smiled, and it reached her eyes. "I know just the place," she said, and texted me the name of a greenhouse that has the good sense to label plants with their true temperaments: fussy, forgiving, thrives on neglect. "Get the last one," she added. "It's our brand for a while." Evan hugged me. It wasn't the hard hug of a boy who wants to be rescued. It was the measured one of a man who knows where his own weight is. "You're coming by Sunday," he said. "Not a question, not a demand. A plan we could keep or change." "We'll make pie." "Pie is an argument I rarely refuse," I said. "Bring your letter. I want to get fancier with thank yous." On my way out, Linda caught my hand the way women over 50 do, like we both know wrists and words. "You did something rare," she said. "You let consequences conduct the orchestra." She paused, half smiling. "I am sorry for the ring and proud of the woman who sold it. I am sorry for the debt and proud of the man who paid it." "I am tired," I said, and we laughed because truth often shows up dressed as fatigue. I drove not back to the motel first, but to the hospice. The florist had called in the morning. Another overshipment. Too many poinsettias for a corporate lobby that discovered red didn't match their branding. I carried 3 into the family room and set them on the window ledge where the afternoon made them look like good news. A man with oxygen humming at his nose looked at the plants, looked at me and said, "Christmas came early." I said, "Sometimes it does," and meant it. Then I went to the greenhouse Kayla had named. The aisles smelled like loam and possibility. A teenager in an apron pointed me toward a shelf labeled, "As promised, thrives on neglect." I chose a pothos that had lived long enough to understand people, paid with my own card, and carried it to my car like proof you can keep something alive without fear that someone will call you selfish for choosing it. Back at the Mapleview, the clerk, my ally in 100 small ways, lit up when I told her I was checking out in the morning. "Moving somewhere?" she asked, as if my life were a thing that could be arranged with a dolly. "Yes," I said. "Into an apartment with a decent radiator and a landlord who likes receipts." She slid 2 extra coffee pods across the counter as a parting gift, and I promised to write the kind of review that helps kind places stay alive. In my room, I set the plant on the windowsill, propped the check against the lamp like a flag I did not intend to wave, and called Marissa one more time. "We did that," I said, not bothering to hide the pride in the plural. "You did it," she corrected. "I just translated human into paper." "Which," I said, "might be the definition of law." She laughed softly. "One more thing," she said. "If they stumble next year, if anything slides, you are no longer on the hook. You can show up as a mother, not a mattress." "I'm keeping the credit freeze," I said. "Good," she said. "And Nora, buy yourself something impractical with a fraction of that check. Not a person, a chair, a painting. Something that doesn't ask you to explain." "I bought a plant that forgives neglect," I said. "It's practically my therapist." "That counts," she said, and hung up with the efficient warmth I've come to love. I walked to the diner for dinner, not to celebrate exactly, more to mark a threshold with the kind of food that reminds you the body exists. Chili again, because repetition is a way of telling the nervous system you can handle joy as easily as panic. The waitress topped off my water and called me Han and asked, "Good day?" The way only strangers can. "A very good day," I said. "A day with a beginning and an end." Back in the room, I did a small ceremony I'm not embarrassed to name. I took the binder, the one labeled house, and moved it from the top shelf of my suitcase to the bottom. I placed the red folder on top of it and then put both in the zippered compartment I use for shoes, because some documents deserve darkness. I took out a fresh folder and wrote, "Apartment" on its tab because hope, too, needs a place to live. I made a list, one that did not include anyone else's future, of lamps and towels and a colander because spaghetti exists. I slept with the window cracked and the plant breathing with me. In the morning, I would walk a mile to see a one-bedroom with decent windows and a rent my check could shoulder without asking me to give up small joys. I would deposit the check and, because life enjoys choreography, set up an automatic transfer to my savings every month labeled Nora's Wild Idea Fund. I don't yet know what the wild idea is. I know only that wild ideas need both money and manners. Before I turned off the light, my phone buzzed. One last text in the day's choreographed dance. A photo from Evan, the ring reset. A modest stone in a simple setting on Kayla's hand, taken in the dim kitchen where spaghetti waited. "It feels lighter," she wrote. "So do I." I stared at that sentence, surprised by how much I wanted to believe her. Then I did believe her, because belief is a practice, too. I set the phone face down, the plant turned a leaf toward the sliver of streetlight, and I fell asleep like a woman who had traded a ring of obligation for a circle of her own choosing. The deadline had come, and instead of breaking us, it had bent us into a shape that could hold. In the morning, the house would still be theirs, the mortgage payment would still come due, the budget would still make broccoli look like a luxury if you weren't careful. But the click I heard that night in my ribs was the clean sound of a latch catching right. Boundaries held. Paper sang its quiet song. And for the first time in months, my future didn't feel like a favor I owed to anyone but me. 6 months later, my pathos had taken over the living room like a polite army. It dropped new hearts every week and learned the path of light through my windows the way I had learned the path of my own days, steady, unsurprised, bending when necessary. The plant had come from a shelf labeled "Thrives on Neglect," but what made it grow wasn't neglect. It was the right kind of attention. Regular water, a turn of the pot, a trim when a vine got ahead of itself. Maybe that was the whole lesson. Do the small things at the right time. Let the right things take root. My apartment had settled into itself. The radiator ticked in winter just enough to feel companionable. The curtains I sewed from a remnant caught the afternoon sun and made the place look warmer than it already was. The dining table was a sturdy second-hand piece that had a long scratch like a story. I bought a single place setting I loved instead of 4 I'd tolerate, because this life was mine, and I was done choosing the practical version of joy for a crowd that didn't show up. On the bookshelf sat a binder labeled "Apartment," organized to the point of smugness, and next to it a thinner folder labeled "Nora's Wild Idea Fund." I fed it monthly, a patient animal. I didn't know yet what the wild idea would be. I suspected it would require courage and sensible shoes. On Sundays, I volunteered at the hospice, a part of the week that asked for nothing but an available heart and the ability to find the extra blankets. The florist kept calling with honest mistakes. Too many lilies for a corporate lobby that decided fragrance was unprofessional, and I'd ferry blooms into rooms where last words wanted company. The nurses teased that I'd become the unofficial decorator. It felt like a job where success meant you'd made things briefly lovely for people who were busy with more important work, remembering, forgiving, letting go. I took a class at the community center called Fix It Yourself, where a woman in coveralls showed 6 of us how to replace a faucet cartridge and patch a hole in drywall. I was the only one who brought cookies and the only one who took notes like a stenographer at a summit. I learned the difference between a Phillips and a flathead, because I intended to. I learned that the internet makes liars out of people who say something is easy, and that confidence is not the same as competence, but it helps you climb the ladder to reach the smoke detector without cursing the ceiling. Once a month, I met Linda for tea. We traded small triumphs like baseball cards. She'd found a new route to the grocery that avoided the left turn that ate 15 minutes. I'd learned how to decant rice into jars without making the floor look like a sand mandala. We talked about our children less and less, and about ourselves more. Linda had joined a walking group that took their steps before the summer heat bossed everybody around. I started a book club with 3 neighbors I met over the mailboxes. We picked paperbacks that knew how to end and pie that didn't argue with cinnamon. Evan and Kayla did not become saints when the calendar flipped. They became regular married people with a mortgage. It turned out to be its own miracle. The credit union closed the refinance on December 15th as promised, and after that, something I could only describe as gravity took over. Their mortgage auto pay went out on the same day each month. They didn't make news any more than the neighbors who ran their sprinklers at sensible hours. The escrow account, titled in the property address like a boundary stone, showed deposits with the hum of a machine set to not dramatic. Kayla kept the salon hours, then added another shift when a stylist went on maternity leave. Evan picked up overtime only when it didn't steamroll him. Turns out a man who sleeps enough can be kinder, and kindness pays in a currency even underwriters respect. Fewer fights, more dinners eaten sitting down. They invited me over on Sundays twice a month, and I went maybe half those times. I kept my yeses as deliberate as my no's, and we learned a rhythm that did not confuse attendance with love. When I went, I brought salad or pie or nothing at all, because bringing yourself is something women my age say and then don't mean. I meant it. Their table wore placemats stitched from old cloth napkins. The centerpiece was a bowl of apples because nobody needed candles to pretend anything. We ate pasta more often than cuisine and talked about things that paid the light bill. Evan's boss, who liked numbers and quiet, Kayla's client, who tipped in cash and gratitude. When conversation stumbled toward budgets, we kept it practical instead of performative. I heard phrases I'd longed to hear in September and no longer needed as validation. That's not in the budget. We'll plan for it next month. The house itself got a haircut. The backsplash stayed because sticky regret isn't a solvent, but the rest of the kitchen wore its age without shame. The jet ski had made room in the garage for a modest shelf of bulk goods bought on sale and a toolbox where the wrenches lived in order. Out front, a square of lawn went to Clover to save on water and mowing, and from somewhere, maybe YouTube, maybe a neighbor with a northern light, they learned to prune the rose bush without scaring it. The ring, reset in December into something the size of wisdom, grew on Kayla's hand like the right word after you've been using the wrong one for years. She showed it to me once, not as a headline, but as a footnote. "It suits me more," she said, then laughed at herself for using the language of chairs. I mean, it's more honest. She started wearing sneakers that could stand 4 hours at a reception desk. She started tipping the neighborhood kid who scooped their dog's gifts off the lawn with more cheer than money justifies. Growth showed up as plainness. I kept my credit freeze. Every time a catalog arrived addressed to current resident, I tossed it into the recycling like a boundary. I replaced my purse after a strand on the strap frayed through, and when guilt showed up with a tape measure and a sermon, I reminded it that I had a budget and I had met it. Nora's Wild Idea Fund grew by quiet increments I named when I made the transfer. March, your hands matter. April, don't talk yourself out of things. May, try the thing. Try the Thing turned out to be a weekend workshop on refinishing furniture. I stripped a thrift store coffee table with patience that surprised me and rubbed it with oil until it looked more like itself. In early June, I got my hair washed and blown out on a Tuesday afternoon because I could. I called the salon the day before and asked for Kayla, because when people do good, you're allowed to give them your business without writing a thesis about conflict of interest. She put a towel around my shoulders and took care with the water temperature, the way women learn to take care when they've been scalded by other things. She didn't pitch products. She didn't narrate. We talked about the dog and the new neighbor who had enthusiastically installed a wind chime that insulted the entire block. She massaged my scalp with the same concentration she used on her own budget. When she turned off the dryer, she met my eyes in the mirror and said, "Thank you for coming in the tone of a person who meant, "Thank you for not making this weird." I tipped well and in cash and did not apologize. At home, I put my head on a clean pillowcase and felt wealthy in the way that makes sense to me now. My bills were paid, the plant was happy, my hair was smooth, and the only debt in the room was a library book due next Thursday. June brought a picnic Linda organized because women like us know that food on a blanket is a spell. We met at the small park near their house, the one with a maple that looked like a reasonable person. Evan grilled chicken thighs on a portable that had last seen sunlight at a tailgate in a different era. Kayla made a pasta salad dressed in olive oil and the new restraint she was learning. Linda brought strawberries and a knife she trusted. I brought lemonade and paper napkins printed with cheerful dots. We ate and watched a little boy insist that geese behave and remembered how geese respond to insistence. It was calm enough for silence. At some point, Evan stood up without clearing his throat and said he had a work update. The crew chief had asked him to lead a small team on a project because he kept his head when things got annoying, which is a sentence that could be used as a definition of adulthood. It came with 50 extra cents an hour and a line on a resume. He didn't look at me when he said it. He looked out at the maple and allowed himself to be proud without auditioning for applause. Kayla chimed in from the edge of the blanket that a bride had booked her for a full afternoon in August and had already paid a deposit, and the salon owner had asked if she'd like to learn scheduling software with an eye toward a shift closing responsibilities. She said the words, "closing responsibilities," as if she liked the way they fit. They spoke of money the way happy people speak about weather, what it was, what it would be, what to wear. "We're keeping the credit freeze," Evan said at one point, to Linda, to me, to himself. We decided we like making inconvenient decisions on purpose. He'd brought chili in a thermos as a joke and pulled it out like a trophy. We all laughed because we recognized the award. In late June, I got a call from Marissa, which used to turn my spine into a radio antenna, and now felt like hearing from a friend who remembers the dates that matter. "Just checking in," she said. "I have a calendar that tells me when people tend to backslide. You're not on that list, but lawyers are superstitious." We talked about small things, the plant, the class, the radiator, before the big thing we almost didn't name. "If something ever went sideways with them," she said, "you know you wouldn't be exposed." I did know. The freedom of not exposed had become the background music of my days. "And you?" she added. "Any wild idea, nibbles?" I told her about the furniture workshop, about the coffee table that accepted its second chance with dignity. I told her I was thinking about turning the corner of my living room into a little sanding and finishing station, because the fumes were manageable with the window open and the drop cloth was a color I liked. I've always loved taking something almost good and helping it be itself, I said, surprised by the accuracy that fell out of my mouth. I did it with people too long. Wood is grateful and quiet. She laughed. "Send me a photo if you start taking commissions," she said. "My desk needs a friend." In July, I had stopped keeping track of the date like a courtroom stenographer and started measuring time in ordinary. The hospice asked if I would coordinate volunteers one weekend when the usual lead needed a break. I did it the way you assemble a small machine and watch it hum. When an argument started near the coffee about how much sugar belonged in grief, I put my hand on the sugar jar and said, "Enough," and people laughed and stopped crying for a minute and then kept crying in a way that mattered more. Evan and Kayla asked me to dog sit for 3 days when their schedules overlapped like a bad Venn diagram. I said I would, on condition that the list of instructions not read like the Magna Carta. They left me a page, feeding times, the trick named dignity, the number of their new next-door neighbor in case the alarm decided to have an opinion. The dog and I did a lot of walking and a lot of not minding quiet. I watered the clover because even low-maintenance things like to be remembered. When I left, I put a note on the counter that said, "All's well. Dog approves your choices." And I believed both sentences. Late summer, Linda went out of town for a conference of people who liked organizing things and wanted to talk about it. She texted me a photo of her lanyard and the session titled "The Compassionate Handle," which made us both think of teacups and sentences. Kayla sent a separate text of the ring, catching sunlight on a bus because symbolism delighted her now, and I had decided to let it. Evan sent a photo of the budget whiteboard. Goals on top, check marks below, and a caption that made me put my hand on my throat. We can breathe at the end of the month now. When you've been a woman whose money left rooms without saying goodbye, you know how huge a breath can be. On my birthday, I bought a chair. It was impractical in the way that makes accountants nervous and good women proud. Blue velvet, curved back, the promise that sitting in it would make my shoulders remember an older posture. I paid cash. I did not explain myself to the clerk. At home, I placed it by the window across from the plant, whose vines had started to consider the curtain rod. I sat, sipped tea, and read a chapter about someone solving a puzzle without burning the house down. For the first time in a long time, I celebrated by adding, not by giving away, in September, almost a year after a dress had glowed in a kitchen and told me to disappear. The country club's newsletter arrived in my mailbox, a misrouted ghost. I leafed through out of anthropological interest. Photos of canapes and golf tournaments and a charity gala, where women held clutches like the concept of need were framed by captions that gave money an accent. I put it directly into the recycling. I had my own charity now, people with oxygen tubes and nurses who needed coffee. Evan and Kayla invited me in early fall for a no-fuss anniversary dinner. I wore the blouse that made me feel like I'd read the paperwork twice and brought a loaf of bread from the good bakery because every house deserves something it didn't have to apologize for. We ate spaghetti and salad and a cake that Kayla had decorated without tags or sponsors. She lit a single candle and said something that might pass for grace in a family that operated more on secular gratitude. "We don't deserve this," she began, and I interrupted gently because words shape lives. "You do," I said. "You earned it, and you keep earning it every time you pay the mortgage and choose beans over a story." The room relaxed. Evan raised his glass of water because wine had become a treat, saved for celebrations that understood their weight. "To beans," he said, and we all laughed, and the laugh didn't have any claws. When I left that night, Kayla walked me to the porch, a habit that had evolved from diplomacy to something that felt like care. She touched my arm the way we do when we mean to say something we might not stick with if we don't anchor it. "Sometimes I think about the party we didn't have," she said. "About the photos in front of a lake that would have looked like a good choice. And then I walk through our kitchen and make coffee that I bought with money I made, and I think, this is a better picture." "You can frame coffee," I said. "All the best art shows have at least one painting of a bowl." She laughed. "I'm sorry again," she said, not flogging herself, just filing. "Not for the 100th time. For right now." "Accepted for right now," I said, because forgiveness is not a one-time coupon. It's a membership with rules. Back in my apartment, I wrote one more line in the notebook I started at the Maple View, the one that now had fewer lists of debts and more lists of recipes and things to Google later. I wrote, "I will not confuse drama with depth. I will not apologize for the size of my piece. The plant kept making leaves. The chair kept saying sit. The folder kept getting thicker by inches. When the wild idea arrived, it would have a place to land. And Evan?" He came by on a Saturday in early October with a piece of furniture balanced in his arms, a wobbly end table rescued from a curb. "Thought you could practice," he said, setting it down carefully on the drop cloth, by the window and rubbing his shoulder like a man who'd carried something worth carrying. He had brought sandpaper and the willingness to be taught. I showed him how to move with the grain, how to back off before you burn a spot, how to check your work with your palm and not your eyes. Kayla texted a photo of him in my living room doing the quiet, repetitive work that makes a finish that lasts. Linda followed it with a photo of a teacup from a flea market that only looked fragile. We sanded and didn't talk much. When we were done, he looked at the table and said, "It's almost good." And we both smiled because we knew my favorite part was next. We wiped the dust and waited. We stirred the oil and rubbed it in, both of us with the patience of people who have learned what happens when you rush. The wood drank what it needed and gave back a shine you couldn't fake. It was not perfect. It was honest. We let it dry with a fan turned low. Evan washed his hands at my sink and held them out like new tools. "I like this," he said quietly. "Me too," I said, and I meant the table in the afternoon and the fact that our lives no longer required an audience to be real. I won't pretend the last year cured every habit or solved every equation. There are days when Kayla's voice gets thin around the edges, and Evan wants something he can't name, and Linda wants to nudge, and I want to proofread everyone's decisions with a red pen. There are days when the dog gets into the trash and the mortgage comes due the same week as the car insurance, and the air conditioner decides its contribution to the family is to retire. There are days when I am tempted by the ease of writing a check to silence a problem that could teach a class. On those days, I look at the plant and water it on schedule. I sit in the chair I bought and read the same paragraph twice until it sticks. I walk to the hospice and pour coffee. I change the smoke alarm battery without waiting for the chirp. I do the small things right. I am not the mother I was in that kitchen last September. I am the woman who packed a suitcase calmly, who called a lawyer and canceled a party, who moved into a room with a radiator and made it a home. I am a person with a binder who made peace with paper because it told the truth while everyone else was auditioning. I am someone who believes in second chances for wood and for people, with the condition that both accept sanding. I am not a mattress, nor a martyr. I am a mother and a neighbor, and a woman who pays her bills, and tips her hairdresser, and buys flowers for rooms that need them. And when I think about stakes now, I don't think about houses or headlines. I think about the simple, stubborn claim I staked on my own life, that my time, my love, and my money would belong to me first, so I could give them on purpose instead of by default. That claim held. It holds. On the first cool night of fall, I opened the window and let the air sentence my rooms to freshness. The plant turned its leaves toward the dark certainty of morning. Somewhere across town, a mortgage auto pay blinked green. At my table, I sealed an envelope with a deposit for a class labeled "Wood Finishes a Tutu" and wrote a neat Nora across the flap because it pleased me. I turned off the light, which is one of the oldest and truest forms of faith, and went to bed in a place where I answered only to need and to love and to the calendar of a life I chose. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.